It's time for another episode of I Am Northwest Arkansas, the podcast covering the intersection of business, culture, entrepreneurship, and life in general here in the Ozarks. Whether you are considering a move to this area or trying to learn more about the place you call home, we've got something special for you. Here's our host, Randy Wilburn.
Hey folks, and welcome back to another episode of I Am Northwest Arkansas. I am excited because I am sitting in the KUAF studio, which is the, what is this? This is the Furman Garner Performance Studio. And I will, from time to time, tell you where I am physically in KUAF's building. But for those of you that haven't been listening to the podcast lately, I struck up a relationship with KUAF and had a real good opportunity to have my podcast shared on their program on Ozarks at Large, which I'm really excited about. And I talk about that in a previous episode of the podcast. And then Kyle Kellums featured me in an interview, which was either the second or third time that I've actually been on Ozarks at Large. So I look forward to tagging and sharing that with you guys. And I'll put that information in the show notes for today's episode. But I want to get to the individual that I'm sitting down with, and his name is Irvin Camacho. And Irvin is well, let me just say this. It's not often I get to sit down with people that actually do a podcast, because that means we're kindred spirits. It also means, they understand the toil and heartache that goes into actually creating these episodes on a regular basis, wondering if people are actually going to listen to the words that come out of their mouths. So I am excited today to sit down with Irvin Camacho, and he is the founder of the District3 Podcast. It is an outstanding podcast. And Irvin, I believe you're based out of Springdale, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So, man, it is so great to have you on this podcast. And you've been somebody that I've been kind of chasing down. I've reached out to you several times, and you're like me, you're super busy, but we finally got together. And that's partly because Irvin is also on the KUAF platform with his District3 podcast. If you go to KUAF, the website, and you scroll down on the right-hand side, you'll see a list of local podcast shows that are represented on the KUAF platform. And Irvin's show, the District3 Podcast, is one of them. So we're also like relatives now, so which is kind of cool. But without further ado, I want to welcome Irvin Camacho to the I Am Northwest Arkansas podcast. How are you doing, man?
I'm doing great, Randy. First of all, I appreciate you pronouncing my name correctly, because people are always getting it wrong. So I appreciate that.
Well, I mean, I grew up with, I was a huge fan of Hector Macho Camacho. Yeah. So I know that name very well. And I think I saw every fight that Hector fought. So,
you know how many times I've been asked if he's my uncle or he's my cousin? Many times.
Many times, I'm sure.
I think he was Puerto Rican, though. I'm Mexican.
No, I know. Yeah, it's definitely a difference, but that's fine. It's fine. And it's, I get that. Coming from the Northeast, you can't confuse the different folks that come from different parts of Latin America. Mm-hmm. And, obviously, I grew up around a lot of Dominicans, a lot of Puerto Ricans, and Dominicans don't want to be confused with Puerto Ricans, and Puerto Ricans don't want to be confused with Dominicans. And then, of course, Mexicans, and then you add El Salvador in there, and it gets interesting. But no, I totally get that. But man, thank you so much for joining me today on this podcast. I really appreciate it. So I would love for you just to kind of share your origin story and how you got into podcasting.
Man, I've been part of community organizing here in Northwest Arkansas since 2009. So I've been focused on immigration reform, on immigrant rights, and just overall trying to be a good ally to different movements in the area. And I noticed back in early 2019 that there was, people talking in Spanish or people talking in English about important issues, but not in a way where you can go in depth on like stigmatized issues in our communities, mental health, talk about community activism, talk about LGBTQ rights, all these different things that were a lot of the time stigmatized in our communities. And I wanted to create a platform where we could talk bilingually.
Yeah.
And talk in Spanish, throw in some English there and here and there, or vice versa. And just allow people that are doing good work in our community to have a platform to talk about what they're passionate about.
Yeah.
And I think that was the most important thing to me, because doing community work, you see so many good people that never get recognition, never get the awards, never get the spotlight on them for the amazing things that they're doing in the community. So I wanted to do that. I said, I've been able to work with a lot of people in community organizing throughout the years. I've built all these relationships. Why don't I capitalize on these relationships and create this platform that allows people to showcase what they're passionate about and what their movement is?
Yeah.
So that's why I started doing this podcast back in mid 2019.
I love that, man. And obviously you started it right before the pandemic. And so I think we all had a chance to kind of be with ourselves during the pandemic and kind of work on this. But I mean, could you have even imagined back in 2009 that there would be a platform like podcasting that would allow you to spread your voice both near and far?
No, honestly, I went to college pretty much for communication. So I've always wanted to do like TV broadcasting. That was my thing. But then I discovered podcasting, and I discovered, being my own boss in this passion. It's not an 8-to-5 job, but being my own boss in the side hustle I have.
Yeah.
And doing things creatively that fulfill me, that make me happy. And then I'm able to, create content that touch people's lives in a very strong way. So for me, it would just happen so naturally when I figured out what podcasting was and that I could do it, with just going on the internet, finding a website, a free website to host my podcast and then distribute it to all these different streaming platforms without me having to pay any money. For me, I was like, I have to capitalize on this. I have to do this because I love communications, and this is a way for me to do it as a passion project.
For sure. I mean, it's a passion project, but it's taken on a life of its own. As of the date that we're recording this, you're upwards of over 170 plus episodes as of now, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, here's the thing that I think that a lot of people don't understand about podcasting that it resonates with me. Podcasting, honestly, gives a voice to the voiceless, right? I mean, there are a lot of people that you've had on your podcast that wouldn't normally have that type of access to individuals, to share what they're going through, to share their challenges, to share their why. I think recently you had a couple on that had gone on honeymoon, and the husband was originally from Mexico, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So he
Chihuahua, Mexico.
Chihuahua. Yeah. Chihuahua. Yeah. So I know about the state of Chihuahua. So he was from Mexico and got detained on the way back from the honeymoon. And that created a real problem. And you guys kind of stepped up and put some pressure on the situation, got into people's ears with the story, right? And it was also in the news too. But I don't know if whether it was in the news because you made it, you made light of it, or if it was in the news because, folks were doing their job and, reporting what would be important to people here in Northwest Arkansas. But that's just an example of how you've leveraged your platform to help somebody and to, just to provide answers and solutions for people that may be struggling looking for them.
Yeah. And sometimes, when you have something going on in your life, whether it being, a tragedy or some good work that you're doing, sometimes you don't know how to reach out to radio people. Sometimes you don't know how to reach out to the news. It's like with our podcast, people can just message us on Instagram and be like, hey, I have this important thing to talk about, or I think you should interview me about this. I think it'd be good for the community. And
that's how I reached you.
Right. And there really is no middleman or middlewoman. It's just kind of like you reach out and if it's something that, we as podcast hosts think is important and good for the community, then we make it happen.
Yeah. I mean, I talk to PR agents. I get PR people call me all the time. PR people send me emails all the time pitching somebody that they want to have on their podcast. I also get pitched directly by people that are like, hey, I have a story to tell, or I love your podcast. I love what you do. And I'd like to share my story because I think it will resonate with your audience. And so I think it's important for us to have that kind of dialogue and be open to individuals when they present themselves to see if they are, worthy of putting behind the mic. Right. And I'm saying that in jest, right? Because I think everybody has a story to tell. Everybody is worthy of being behind the mic. Whether they choose to or not is a whole different ball game.
And also, I mean, it's also important to point out you're the one that puts in the hard work to create this podcast, to record it and stuff. And you want to have people on your podcast that you're interested in or that you feel bring some sort of important information to the community. Because, like you said, everyone has the ability or can record something. And yes, if you had the time and the ability to interview everyone that wants you to interview them, that'd be great, right? But since you don't, because you have a family, you have your own job and stuff, you really have to focus on the people that are going to excite you as a podcast host to interview them and to bring valuable information to the community.
Yeah, absolutely. So 2019, you start this podcast and of course the pandemic hits. Mm-hmm. How did the pandemic maybe change how you did the podcast or how you communicated with your audience?
Definitely a lot of mask wearing.
Yeah, of course.
And
there's people still wearing masks right now. So yeah.
But I think, we still continued recording, but when we recorded, we definitely kept our distance from each other.
Sure.
Some people, because we transitioned to a smaller studio at the Springdale Civic Center for a while.
Okay.
And there, everybody that would come in wearing masks, and they would ask me if they wanted me to take them off. And I would say, no, whatever you feel comfortable with. I'm not going to. Sometimes the majority of the times we would record with our masks on, which for audio quality wasn't the best thing.
Sure.
But I would give people a heads up before we started recording the podcast. And I would say, right when I started recording the podcast, I would say, hey, if it sounds a little muffled, it's because we're trying to be responsible adults here with our masks on. So excuse us, but we would still record. And like I said, the majority of the people during the peak of the pandemic would come in wearing masks, and power to them because that studio was really, really hot. It was probably 90 degrees, 100 degrees. We didn't have AC, and people would still come in with their mask and record. So I'm super appreciative of the people that struggled with us throughout that time. And now we're in this studio in KUAF with AC, big space.
Big space. We got room to spread ourselves out and high quality equipment. Yes. Right? Where you literally, there's no excuse now, right? I don't know how you feel about this because you've been here a little longer than I have, but we walk in the door and we're like ready to record. There's no, and I always tell people, because people will come sometimes and meet me when I do record over at the Center for Innovation. Shout out to those guys. I will still use that space. I'm not going to change anything, but I'm going to probably use the KUF space a little bit more just because it's ready to go.
Yeah.
And, I have, as a podcaster, you have to be ready to kind of record whenever, people are available. So I always carry a digital recorder with me. I always have a couple of really good mics. I always have some headphones because you just never know when the opportunity is going to present itself. Yeah. So you want to be ready to catch that person.
And I think, so I'm going to tell you a little bit about the journey of the studios that we were in. First, we started off at this office on the corner of College, and I forgot the other street, but it's right in front of the, what's that market called that's on the corner of, it's like College close to Dixon. It's like a big market.
Ozark Natural Foods?
Yes, right across the street from it. There's a little office
house that's next to the gas station.
Yes, we recorded there for about a year.
I didn't know. Okay.
Which used to be Judge Mahoney for Congress campaign office.
Right.
So he let us record there.
Okay.
Which I'm super appreciative. Then we transitioned to the radio station over there at the Civic Center, which I'm so grateful for Eddie Vega that allowed us to have that space. We were live on the radio too. So we were live on 99.9 Hot Latin for a while. And then we were given the opportunity to come here to KUAF a few months ago, and just having the space, the sound quality. We started recording on my phone.
Yeah.
We were recording the podcast on my phone, no mics. And I had to go into editing software and raise the volume up to make it sound decent. But now you can tell the difference in quality when you listen to the episodes in the past few months that I've been recording here. Such a world difference of quality.
It's like night and day. It's definitely like night and day. Yeah. And I tell people all the time, there are programs like Anchor. I'm holding up my phone. You can't see it because we're not recording video, but I'm holding up my phone in my hand and I'm basically saying, listen, this is all you need to get started with a podcast, then grow into it. Make sure it's what you want to do. I love doing this. I'm up to almost 1,500 episodes now, not of just this podcast, but of other podcasts that I've been doing. And I've been podcasting since 2009. And to be honest with you, I had trepidation when I first started. I was scared and I kind of languished in the background, if you will, until I found my voice. And the only way you found your voice, well, the only way I found my voice, and the only way that anyone doing a podcast or anything for that matter will find their voice, is if you keep training, you keep doing it over and over. You just have to press record. Yeah,
I was talking to Rochelle from Row on the Radio's her handle.
Have you been on her show?
I have. I was there about 2 months ago.
Yeah, I was on her show. We talked about colorism.
Okay.
Which was a really cool episode. And actually, I had somebody come up to me at the Black Expo saying, well, you were on a show with Row talking about colorism, right? And I was like, yeah, that was me. And she was like, I loved that episode. And I was like, oh, that's cool. That honestly, Irving, that is what makes it worthwhile. Just those interactions with people where you don't think people are listening, but they really are.
Definitely.
And you don't realize, like, if you didn't come out with your episode when you're supposed to come out with it, like, you know, all hell would break loose, right? People would be like, hey, what's going on? What's going on with the episode? And you're like, what? What are you talking about? So
yeah, right now, this week, we're posting an episode tomorrow about a murder that happened of a Springdale resident. And we posted like the teaser for it yesterday, and it's blown up, you know, and one of my friends texted me and he said, hey, we heard about the podcast episode that you're about to post because my sister-in-laws were talking about it in the dinner table.
Wow.
And for me, I mean, I've heard people tell me that they listen to it, they come up to me and stuff. But whenever I heard that, like they're talking about it in the dinner table, I was like, wow, like that's, I don't know, that hit different.
It does. It does hit different. Yeah. I mean, you become, you know, part of the story and you don't realize how important these stories are to people. And I think that's important now. And I saw that post about that where you teased that upcoming episode. Was he killed in Springdale or was he killed somewhere else?
He was killed in Mexico.
That's what I thought. That's kind of what I thought. Yeah. And you interviewed his daughter, right?
Yes. Yeah. So they've been going through the legal system for 9 years now. And they didn't want to become public about it because of legal stuff.
Yeah.
But it's gotten to the point where they just want to break their silence and they want to tell the community what they've been going through.
Sure.
And also just to kind of put it out there that if there's anybody else in the community that's going through similar things, they're here to support. They're here. And they also want to get guidance too. If there is anybody that's gone through similar things, what they're going through, they want the advice of those people as well. So once again, this is just kind of like a blessing that we have as podcast people that we're able to not only provide the platform, but build these connections with folks in the community that ultimately will be beneficial to them and will be beneficial to the community as well. So, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think that is what is really valuable about podcasts. And again, it's like they're portable. I can listen to it while I'm walking the dog, washing the car, washing the dishes, taking a walk, whatever. I can listen to a podcast, you know. And so the beauty of the portability of it is also nice. So you can take advantage of it. So what do you think? Because I know recently the Northwest Arkansas Council came out with a report on the demographics of this area as we continue to grow. And the Latin American population has just grown up like gangbusters. The percentages and numbers are just huge in terms of growth, population growth in this area. What has that, because you've been here for how long now?
Since 2002.
Okay, so you've been here for a minute. You're an OG, as we like to say.
I'm an Arkansan. As much as before I was like, no, I'm from California. Now I'm an Arkansan.
You're Arkansan. Yeah. So were you born in California? Okay, where?
I was born in Salinas, California.
I know where Salinas
Monterey
is.
County.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Very, very rich soil out there. So I love Carmel.
I was just there 2 years ago.
Yeah, Carmel by the sea, the Gilroy Garlic Festival. So so I know it well. But anyway, so you really are an Arkansan. Like I was telling my son who's 12, he's lived in Arkansas more than he's lived in Massachusetts. So I'm like, even though you were born in Boston, you're an official Arkansan now. But I don't know if you saw that report that was put out by the council, but what did that say to you about this area in terms of the growth that we're seeing?
I think specifically there's a lot of jobs here, and that's one of the driving factors. That's why people want to come here. I know that was the biggest factor for us. There was more jobs. There was more opportunities college-wise as well. And contrary to what some people might think, this is a very safe place. You know, it's a very safe place.
Absolutely.
Sure, we have our little issues here and there, right? But overall, if you compare it to where I'm from, where I'm from, like we show up on an episode of Cops. Like every episode of Cops has a segment dedicated to my birthplace.
Yeah.
To Salinas, California.
Yeah.
You know, and we come from a place where in our neighborhood, there was a lot of crime, gang activity and stuff. Here, I haven't had any issues myself.
Right.
Ever.
Right.
You know, and we're very blessed to be here. But I think what ends up happening is that one relative will move here from someplace in Mexico, and then they'll tell the rest of the relatives who live in either Mexico or California or other states, come over here. There's jobs.
Right.
Like I've interviewed probably 40, 50 people on this podcast where their story has been that. It's been like, I asked them, how did you get here? And they said a relative told us that there was jobs, opportunities, and it was a safe place to move to. And that's why we moved here. We just want to succeed. We want to be able to, as cliche as this may sound, pursue the American dream and
Absolutely.
live it, you know, and be happy with our families.
Yeah.
So I think that's the driving factor as to why you see these populations of Latinx folks increase here in Northwest Arkansas and Arkansas in general.
Yeah. And I'm glad you mentioned that. And I want to ask you this because, you know, I get asked this all the time. And I know there's been blowback and there's a little bit of PC about the whole term Latinx.
Yeah.
Where do you fall on that conversation? Is it acceptable? Is there a better term to use as far as that's concerned? Because there are a lot of people that struggle with it. And I don't, that's not really my focus is, hey, if you're my brother, you're my brother. You may happen to be of Latin descent, but you know, you're my brother, you're my sister as far as that's concerned. But I'm curious to know because I know a lot of people struggle in this area. And it's like, well, what words should I use? What have you said? And what is acceptable in the community that you're finding? So
this was part of the conversation I had with Ro on her podcast.
Okay.
We talked about this. So it's complicated, right? I want to start by saying that it's complicated. And I also want to start by saying that I am not the sole representative of the Latinx community.
Oh, I got you. And I'm just like I'm not the sole representative of all Black people. That's for sure.
Before we get the trolls up in here. So I use the word Latinx simply because folks from the trans LGBTQ community told me that's the term at that time that made them feel welcome, inclusive, and in the Latino community. So that's why I use it. And also, I use it because, let's say, for example, there's a room full of Latina women, right? It's a room full of Latinas. One man comes in, it stops being a room full of Latinas, it becomes Latinos. Right? So Latinx for me just made sense simply because of the inclusive part, but at the same time, just to kind of find some sort of term that represents us all and that it includes everybody that may use some other type of terms in the future.
Sure.
But after saying that, Latinx is not used in our family gatherings. Like my family has never used the term Latinx. They'll use Latinos, Latinas, Hispanics. Those of us, the majority of us that use the Latinx term are not forcing anybody to use it. We're just saying, this is why we use it. This is why it's important to us. Some people use Latinx. Some people use Latina because it has the E at the end and it's easier to pronounce in Spanish for folks.
Yeah.
We're not going to get mad at whatever you use. Just don't, as long as you don't use anything derogatory, we don't care what you call us. This is just what we're going to call ourselves. And we don't understand why it's been made a big deal because we're not trying to force anything on anyone.
Yeah.
But ultimately, the ones that use Latina or Latinx, we're just trying to be inclusive. That's it. Doesn't hurt anybody. Doesn't affect anybody, but it does make someone feel welcomed into our community by us using that term.
Okay.
That's why.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So, all right. Well, I will certainly keep that in mind as I move forward, but every now and then it does come up. And so I just figured it would be worth asking. So
it's not a big deal. It's not. I think only 3% of the Latinx population use the term. And I know a lot of people have said that the other percent hate it. But they don't hate it. They just don't know about it, don't care about it, don't have a conversation about it. But it's up to us. Maybe the next generation will use it more, right? But we're not here trying to force our parents or folks that are older to use it. We just, we use whatever they want to use. So we don't even use those kind of terms. We don't even use, like in conversations, we really don't talk about Hispanics, Latinos, or anything in our families. We just talk about us, without labels. But they're trying to make it a big deal, but it really isn't.
Yeah.
For us.
I got you.
Yeah.
I got you. No, that makes perfect sense. So now, I know you offer a bilingual podcast. How are you able to do both episodes? Are some episodes in English? Some episodes are in Spanish?
So we've done episodes in Spanish, and the majority of our episodes are in English. But whenever there's someone that comes in that speaks Spanish and English, we'll just change. We talk in Spanish and then we'll just shift to English. But we try to have the majority of the language be English so that folks that don't understand Spanish can still enjoy it.
And relate.
Yes.
Yeah.
But the goal is if someone comes in that's bilingual, we're going to throw in some Spanish in there because we want to keep that bilingual flow going. And sometimes it just comes out naturally without thinking.
Yeah.
Like I'll be talking English and then I get mad or something and the Spanish comes out.
Right.
You know?
Right.
So we try to do it in that way. We can't go full Spanish just because a lot of the folks that listen to us won't understand.
Yeah.
And we want to stay true to our roots and include Spanish. So we, like I said, we try to put it in there whenever we have some bilingual guests. We don't want to make anybody feel left out, though.
Yeah. No, that makes perfect sense. So what are you kind of looking forward to in the future with the podcast? What are you hoping to, I mean, like I said, you're now in here at KUAF and you're kind of on a nice cadence with getting the episodes out. Oh, by the way, which day can people expect the episode for District 3 to come out?
Honestly, some weeks we have 2 episodes, 3 episodes, or 1 episode. So there's not like a specific date.
Okay.
I would just say if y'all want to subscribe to the podcast, either on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, you'll get a notification telling you when it comes out.
Sure.
That's what I recommend people to do, but we don't have a set date at this moment. We just try to put at least 1 a week. Sometimes we do 2 or 3.
2 or 3. Yeah. No, that's cool. Yeah. You're a brave man. That's for sure. I mean, it's
it's difficult.
Listen, trust me. I know everything I try to do to get 1 episode out a week, although we typically will batch produce our stuff. So I always have about a month or 2, well, almost 2 months worth of content.
Okay.
Right. But sometimes things come up like, we're meeting now, and not that this episode's going to drop right away because I already have stuff in my editorial calendar, but there's always situations that come up. Like I recently had Danny Collins from 37 North Expeditions come to me and tell me about an event that he is directing for an outdoor adventure thing. So kind of like think of like adventure race here in Northwest Arkansas. It's going to be a big deal because there are teams from all over the world coming to participate in this race. And so I said, you know what, we'll get you on early enough before this event happens just to create some more awareness for it. And so, that things like that come up, but that's not that often. Right.
Yeah.
And I'm not the news. So that's what KUAF is for. They deliver the news. That's what Kyle and the rest of the team here does in terms of the news that they share on Ozarks at Large, as well as the larger news reports that come out through the public radio station here. So
do you do all the social media stuff for I Am Northwest Arkansas? Do you handle all of that?
I have an assistant, and I love her to death. Her name
I wish I could get there one day.
Yeah,
I'm doing everything myself.
Listen, dude, there is no way I would fall out because, like I tell you, I've got 3 boys at home, and they run me ragged. But I have an assistant, Caroline, and Caroline is she is the bee's knees, as they say. And when you find a good assistant, you've got to stick with them. And so I really appreciate her, and I haven't really given her a shout out on the podcast before, but Caroline, if you're listening, I really appreciate you, and I'll be sure to let you know that I did mention your name on this episode today. So, but yeah, I mean, you have to get help, especially if you're going to, at this point, like I said, this is a business, and, I mean, it's kind of cool that I get to do something that I absolutely love doing. Like it appears like you love doing what you're doing, both from the community organizing perspective, but also just sharing, creating a platform and then sharing it with a number of people.
Yeah, I think we're very blessed to be able to, have the opportunity to do this. And, like going back to what I said, being able to do it in this studio, that's very comfortable. It's got really good equipment and have the support of folks at KUAF and people in our community that have listened to our podcast. It just feels good to have that support. And I feel like we can both relate on that we see that support in social media.
Without a doubt.
Or just when someone comes up to us and tells us about an episode that they listened to.
Well, and you and I hadn't really talked a whole lot before this, and we're really just kind of getting acquainted, even though we've kind of met or we have common friends. But yeah, now that we know each other, I'm certainly going to be, cheering you on and encouraging you and sharing whatever I can share with you, because again, the idea is that no man or woman is an island unto themselves. We all need other people to do what we need to get done. And so, and that's the thing that I like about Northwest Arkansas. And if you're listening to this and you're thinking about moving to this area, I always switch gears and talk about this on every episode in some way. This is a great place to come because people will take you for who you are, right? I mean, technically, you've been here for 20 plus years, right? You could be looking at me like, man, what's up with this guy? He just came here a couple of years ago and he's trying to talk about he's Northwest Arkansas. But, you welcome me with open arms. The people that I've met here at KUF have welcomed me with open arms. Everybody that I've connected with in Northwest Arkansas has welcomed me with open arms. And there's no litmus test that I have to go through to be accepted here. And that's what I think makes Northwest Arkansas so special. Yeah. And I know that, I don't have a Pollyanna view about Northwest Arkansas. It's not perfect. No place is. But I believe that people try very hard here to connect with folks. Yeah. And when they see that that's what you're about, then they're really willing to bend over backwards and basically give you the shirt off their back. Yeah, it's perfectly imperfect. Yeah. And, one of the things that we have to emphasize, we're two people of color doing podcasting in Northwest Arkansas. Yeah. And I feel like there's power in that, and there's not only because of what we're doing, but we're kind of showing other people of color as well. Like, hey, look, we're here. We're in these spaces. Yep. We're in a KUAF studio, both of us here right now, and you can do it too. Yeah. Like it doesn't take money to do what we're doing. If you really want to do it, the website's free. Yep. You can record off your phone if you really needed to. Yeah. So it's possible to do this kind of work that we're doing. Yeah. No, without a doubt, man. It doesn't take much. And I would certainly encourage anyone, if what we have shared on today's episode encourages you to, maybe you've been thinking about doing a podcast, I want to encourage you to do it. And I'm putting this out there. I mean, I certainly don't have the bandwidth to do this, but I am going to say if anybody listening to this podcast has a desire to start a podcast, let me know. I actually have some tools that I can share with you. I've done some classes with the Fayetteville Public Library in terms of podcasting A to Z, some things to get you thinking about what your podcast should be and how you should start it up. But Irving is exactly right. It doesn't take much to get started. And who knows, you may have a platform that everybody needs to hear. Yeah. And that's the important thing. And I'll end with this because I noticed that you've had Marshallese people on, and that's a huge segment of the community. There probably needs to be a Marshallese podcast. Definitely. You know what I'm saying?
They have a radio station.
I know they have a radio station. Yeah. But again, it's the time shifting of things, right? Mm-hmm. One of the things that's nice about podcasting is that I can record this. When I put it out, you don't necessarily have to be there at a certain time to listen to it. But when it pops up on your phone, then you can consume it. And the challenge with radio is that, man, I may not be available at noon or 7 when that show's going to air. And if it's not, if they don't re-air it as a podcast or something like this, the way that KUAF does Ozarks at Large, as well as some of their other programming, then I miss out. Yeah. And that's why I'm saying, terrestrial radio is great and I will love it till the day I die. But there is something about podcasting that gives you that abilities in the same way that you time shift and when you watch TV. Yeah. And I think the freedom to express yourself how you want to express yourself. Right. My podcast is a little bit more like we go political. Sure. Because of my community work, I have a responsibility to not interview someone that's oppressive in any way. Or, absolutely. So I wouldn't do that either, though. I know you wouldn't. Yeah, I wouldn't do that either because I got to look myself in the mirror every day. Yeah. But that's also your platform too. Yeah. And right. So you have to thine own, as Shakespeare said, to thine own self be true. Mm-hmm. That's your platform. Yeah. And I have people in the community because of the community work that I do that will hold me accountable and call me out or call me in and tell me, why did you have this person on? Yeah. This person has done this. So I know that no one's perfect and that people are going to make mistakes, right? But I have to be very mindful of the people that I have on the podcast. I can see someone in the community and be like, oh, they're cool. They're doing this. But I also have to be like, man, what have they done publicly or that has done any kind of damage to people? I had a very similar situation. Well, I've had similar situations where people have reached out to me and said, hey, I heard you're thinking about having so-and-so on. Or I've reached out to somebody to say, hey, do you know this person? I'm thinking about possibly inviting them on. Yeah. And then I've gotten what I would term to be a bad report. Right. Mm. And it's like, and it's hard, right? Because you don't always know, whether that person has an issue with them or whether it's legitimate. Mm-hmm.
That's true.
And so the challenge for me is I try to treat people at face value. Fool me once, shame on me. Fool me. Well, I forget what the way it goes. Is it fool me once, shame on you? Fool me twice, shame on me. I don't know, something. I just don't like to be fooled.
Yeah.
But I also like to give people the benefit of the doubt, right? Because I would want somebody to give me the benefit of the doubt. If I've rubbed anybody wrong with this podcast and you didn't like something that I said, certainly reach out to me. We always can talk at hello@imnorthwestarkansas.com. But I tell people all the time, I'm very, like you said, very imperfect. So I'm a work in progress.
Yeah. And people deserve second chances.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And there are a lot of folks. Now, there are some, it's harder to give them a second chance because they can never get their foot out of their mouth.
They've had like 7 chances.
Yes,
like,
exactly.
Man, I'm sorry, but we just can't,
Yeah, you can't do that. So, and I have no problem if somebody came to me and said, hey, I've reached out to you several times. How come I can't come on the show? Of me telling them, hey, this is why. These are the things that I struggle with. And I have to reconcile that with both for myself and for my audience.
Yeah.
And then just, at that point. And so there has to be that understanding. So, well, listen, man, I want to end with this. And now, are you familiar with Banco C? Oh, so it's the first multilingual bank or Spanish bank, actually.
Oh, Banco C. Yeah.
Banco C. Yes. Yeah. So up in
I didn't know you were talking Spanish there.
Yes,
I was thinking of something else, but
no.
I do.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm familiar with it.
Yeah. So I've had a chance, because Signature Bank is a sponsor of this podcast, I've had a chance to get to know the folks at Banco C. And I must say that I've really been impressed with the efforts that they've made to try to connect with a community that, not unlike the African American community, has struggled in being banked, right? And having having a place to go put their money and not under their mattress. And I think it's important for people to become aware of that and know that they do have some options that are there. So, but I certainly, anybody listening to this, would encourage you to head up to Rogers. If you're up there right in the downtown area, Banco C is right there, right off of the park, the rail yard area there. And they're doing some really, really great work. And
I could have sworn I saw that they're opening up a new branch.
I think they are. Okay. I think they may be in Springdale, which makes sense.
Yeah.
Which makes sense. But yeah, they are. And I mean, what Gary had, his heart is definitely in the right place in terms of what he's trying to do. And I think they're executing it very well. And Francisco and the rest of the team there are doing a great job. I mean, everybody speaks Spanish in there.
I haven't had the chance to meet them. I missed their opening.
I got to host that opening, which was really nice. Yeah,
I saw pictures of it.
Yeah, there was a woman that's a real estate agent. She also does some stand-up stuff for Univision. She was my co-host, so she did everything in Spanish. I did everything in English.
Okay. Yeah. I wonder who it was. It was either Andrea or Suzuki, one of those two.
It might be Andrea.
Okay.
Yeah. So anyway, I apologize if you're listening and I forgot your name. Don't yell at me. I'm terrible with names, and I'm great with faces, terrible with names. So.
And if you have any complaints, you can just email at hello@imnorthwest.
Right. Exactly. Thank you, Irvin. I appreciate that, man. So, well, listen, man, this has been a great conversation. This is certainly the first time that we've had a chance to really sit down and chop it up. It won't be the last. I'm actually going to join you on a future upcoming podcast episode for you with the District 3 podcast. So we'll kind of have a crossover, and I'll share your podcast on my platform, and you can share my podcast on your platform, and we'll do something like that. I've had some friends that have done that with a certain amount of success, and so I would love to do that just to kind of make sure that my audience is aware of what you're doing and vice versa. So
thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. We appreciate
the opportunity to be here.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, folks, there you have it. Another episode of the I Am Northwest Arkansas podcast. Listen, I want to ask you to do me 2 favors. One, I want you to go to your phone and look up either Spotify, if that's your preferred music player, or Apple Podcasts or Apple Music, if that's it would be Apple Podcasts, if that's your preferred way to listen to podcasts. Subscribe to the I Am Northwest Arkansas podcast. We are on every major platform. We would love to have you as a subscriber. That way you would know exactly when our episode gets released every Monday. We come out rain or shine every Monday with a brand new episode. I also want to ask you to do me one other favor. On our website, there's a pop-up that comes up. We'd love for you to join our email list. Please consider doing that to get our weekly newsletter. I have been writing this newsletter. Now, just for transparency's sake, it hasn't been every week for a while, but I'm on a roll now, and I've been getting a lot of encouragement, and I have a new email service provider, which I really like, which is ConvertKit. I'll talk more about that later, but I really want to encourage you guys to join our newsletter. We are trying to get over 1,000 folks on our newsletter in the next couple of months. So I would hope that you would be part of that number, because we have thousands of people that follow us on most of the social media platforms. But, the challenge with that is that Mark Zuckerberg could have a bad night's sleep and change the algorithm. And then all of a sudden, I can't reach you guys on Facebook groups anymore. So keep that in mind. But I have control over my email list, and that's important to me and to us here at I Am Northwest Arkansas. So please join our email newsletter and get updated on all the things that are happening here in Northwest Arkansas at the intersection of business, culture, entrepreneurship, and life. I am your host, Randy Wilburn. As always, I appreciate you joining me, and I will see you next week with another new episode of the I Am Northwest Arkansas podcast. Peace.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of I Am Northwest Arkansas. Check us out each and every week, available anywhere that great podcasts can be found. For show notes or more information on becoming a guest, visit iamnorthwestarkansas.com. We'll see you next week on I Am Northwest Arkansas.